Imagine that you wake at midnight with a screaming baby while darkness presses beyond the fire. The child cries so loudly that every sleeping person shifts, and the forest seems to listen. You cannot switch on lights, check a thermometer, or call anyone who understands what is wrong. All you have are your arms, your instincts, and a frightened question you cannot answer. What did ancient parents do when a baby kept crying and nothing seemed to calm them? There was no single ancient method, because families lived differently across thousands of places and generations. The first clue changes everything. Ancient babies probably spent far less time separated from human bodies. They were carried against chests, hips, and backs while adults walked, gathered, worked, and rested. A baby felt breathing, warmth, familiar smells, and the steady rhythm of another person's movement. For them, comfort was not a silent room filled with carefully designed modern objects. Comfort was pressure, skin, heartbeat, motion, and a voice arriving before panic became a scream. Modern parents often react after crying becomes loud enough to fill an entire room. In a small camp, distress could be noticed earlier through tiny movements beside the caregiver's body. The baby might be shifted, held tighter, rocked, or fed before waking everyone nearby. But the strangest part begins here, because the strongest soothing tool may not have been an object. It may simply have been another warm body remaining close almost every minute of the day. Human infants are born helpless, unable to find food, escape cold, or hide from danger. Their cry is not manipulation. It is an ancient alarm with only one available button. That alarm can mean hunger, pain, loneliness, heat, smoke, cold, or an uncomfortable position. So the caregiver tested one possibility after another, exactly as exhausted parents still do today. They pulled the baby closer, offered milk, changed shoulders, stepped away from smoke, and kept walking. They added warmth, loosened coverings, hummed softly, or passed the child into different waiting arms. That last action matters more than it seems, because ancient parenting was rarely completely solitary. We imagine one mother alone beside the fire, responsible for feeding, soothing, carrying, and protecting. But many children likely grew inside a network of grandparents, siblings, fathers, aunts, and trusted companions. When one person became exhausted, the baby could move toward another familiar voice and heartbeat. The mother remained central, but she was not the only barrier between helplessness and danger. There was no nursery, monitor, electric swing, or machine designed to imitate human movement. But several nearby people recognized the cry and understood that somebody needed to respond quickly. One exhausted woman did not always wake alone. A small support system woke beside her. Someone rebuilt the fire. Another freed her hands, while someone else carried the restless baby. A familiar person might walk slowly around camp until the child's breathing finally softened. But this is only half the story, because sometimes closeness, feeding, and movement did nothing. Then crying stopped being merely exhausting and became a warning nobody could clearly interpret. A baby could not point toward pain or explain that breathing, swallowing, or warmth felt wrong. Adults watched the skin, touched the forehead, listened closely, and searched for swelling or wounds. They knew practical care, but they had no tests, antibiotics, or doctors explaining invisible illness. And here everything becomes frightening, because failure did not always mean the caregiver chose incorrectly. Sometimes the child remained inconsolable because something serious was already happening inside the body. For an ancient family, endless crying could suddenly become a silence they feared even more. So we should not romanticize the past as a world where parents always understood children. They made mistakes, became angry, grew exhausted, and sometimes followed customs we would consider dangerous. The ancient world had no universal manual, only people guessing what a helpless child needed. That problem is still painfully familiar. How do you comfort someone unable to describe suffering? Now imagine the worst moment. The night continues, yet every familiar method has already failed. The baby's cry travels beyond the firelight, disappearing between trees where nobody can see clearly. We cannot prove crying regularly attracted predators, but frightened parents did not need scientific certainty. With a helpless infant in your arms, every sound outside the light seems dangerously close. But the real danger was not only beyond camp, and this changed the entire group. Crying stole sleep from people who needed strength, attention, and quick reactions by morning. Exhaustion slowed hunters, gatherers, caregivers, and guards, making ordinary mistakes far more costly than before. One tiny voice could change the physical condition and emotional balance of everyone nearby. That may explain why the answer was usually not isolation, but even greater closeness. The baby was not carried into a separate dark room because such rooms rarely existed. Instead, the child remained among breathing, footsteps, whispers, fire sounds, and familiar human voices. Even sleep happened closer to other bodies than it does inside many modern houses. This is not advice to copy ancient sleep practices, because modern safety guidance is different. A baby entered not a sealed household of 2 exhausted adults, but an entire group. And that changed everything, because distress could be noticed and answered before becoming desperate. Perhaps ancient babies were not naturally calmer. Perhaps their discomfort was simply intercepted earlier. The child moved, someone adjusted them. The child whimpered, someone pulled them closer immediately. When one caregiver weakened, another person stepped forward without waiting for a complete physical collapse. The system could fail during hunger, sickness, cold, violence, migration, or conflict within the group. But when it worked, it distributed a burden that modern life often gives one person. And this is where ancient parents suddenly begin looking uncomfortably similar to us today. We also fear crying that cannot be stopped, because helplessness quickly becomes physical panic. The shoulders tighten, the heart races, and one thought repeats, I do not understand. Today, that moment often happens behind a closed door, far from relatives or trusted friends. One adult walks the room, watching time as though a clock might reveal the answer. We own cribs, monitors, strollers, apps, toys, and machines designed to imitate comforting movement. But sometimes we have fewer hands, and that is the part modern life hides. The most important ancient soothing tool may not have been a song, herb, or technique. It may have been another person willing to take the child before exhaustion became despair. Someone who brought water, shared the weight, and silently told the parent they had not failed. We built warmer homes and learned to treat illnesses that once killed children without explanation. The past was not safer, gentler, or easier, and many babies still did not survive. But while removing danger, modern life sometimes removed the surrounding circle of help as well. The infant does not understand schedules, distant relatives, work tomorrow, or walls between neighboring homes. Their body still expects warmth, movement, quick responses, and a familiar voice close enough. So ancient parents fed, carried, rocked, warmed, repositioned, searched for pain, and called others nearer. They returned the child to the place human infants occupied through most of our history. Against the body, among familiar voices, held nearby inside many patient and exhausted hands. And perhaps a crying modern baby is not asking for some forgotten ancient secret. Perhaps the child is calling for the village that once always answered from nearby.